under capitalism, we are so far away, especially if you live in a city, but not just if you live in a city, even if you live in the countryside, you're very far removed from how things are actually produced, especially food, you know. At night I get to see dairy cows out here, and then I know where the dairy is, so I'm a little closer to that, but that's just dairy stuff, you know. I don't actually see how tomatoes are being grown. I don't see how, you know, meat is being butchered. I don't see any of those things. We are removed from it. So that's part of alienation. But another part of alienation is the... Hello, crow. Sorry, I always have to say hi to crows. Another part of alienation of labor is that we forget that there are humans involved in actually producing this stuff. Now, I'm recording this on a used iPhone that I was given by my sister after she got a new one. iPhone, that's made by Apple, right? Well, not really. Apple's the one who sells it. iPhones are actually made by a bunch of really poorly paid Chinese workers in factories with materials that are made from African children working in pretty close to slave conditions. Apple, Steve Jobs, well, I guess he's dead, but, you know, the head of Apple, the company Apple, didn't actually make this phone I'm using to record this video, nor did they make this laptop. Instead, a bunch of people that I do not see, that I am alienated from, who are invisible to me, they made it. And the trick in capitalism is that we don't notice that. Those people are invisible to us. And instead we think, oh, yeah, that's an Apple product, or that's a Windows product, or, you know, you can apply this to anything else. You know, you go to the Gap or H&M or any other clothing store, and, you know, you think, oh, yeah, that's an H&M product. No. That was made by poor, usually women, in Cambodia or Thailand. We don't see them. Instead, all we see is this brand, this label. That is part of alienation of labor. Now, I saved talking about labor specifically as a term because I needed to talk about alienation first. But, you know, as I say in the book, I see labor, and so does Karl Marx, as a alchemical transmutation. It's how things get value. It's how things become usable for humans. How you know, we're able to recognize something as oh, yeah, I can use that, thanks. For instance, right now my man is cooking. He is laboring. He is turning a bunch of raw ingredients into a meal that we'll both eat. What he's doing is alchemy. What he's doing is, I mean, you can also call that witchcraft too. But what you also do in your job, you know, regardless of what you are, what you do in your job, you are also alchemically transmuting raw materials or raw ideas into something usable for somebody else. You are the core engine of value, of how things work, just as that immigrant farm laborer is the core engine of how food is produced, especially within the United States. But in Europe, it's the same way. Just, you know, put African and, you know, North African farm workers instead of Mexican farm workers and South American farm workers. Now, that labor is invisible to us. We tend not to think of, you know, right now, as my man is cooking for me, we tend not to think of that as labor. It tends to be invisible. There's another quality of the alienation of labor that's extremely important. And I mention a woman named Silvia Federici pretty often in this book and often in my other writing as well. But Silvia Federici was probably the first writer to really bring out the invisibility of women's labor particularly. Now, we all do uncompensated labor, but within capitalism, especially in capitalism within the West, women have been kind of consigned to this role where they're the support laborers of capitalism. You know, the idea, you think of the 1950s housewife, which still exists just without all of the mythology around it. You know, the person who's doing all of the laundry for the family, who's cooking the dinners, getting the children up for work, getting the husband up for work. When everybody comes home, then she's taking care of everybody. The husband's in a bad mood, so she has to get him in a better mood. You know, Women particularly have suffered. Sorry about the airplane. I'm going to pause for a moment. It should be gone by now. Women particularly suffer under capitalism because of that invisibility. Most of the labor that they do, most of the work that they do is uncompensated. And yet, at the same time, women in that traditional role, and of course now with modern society changing a bit, you also see sometimes men are in that same position as well. But that labor is required to make sure that you as a worker are able to go to work. If you don't have someone doing it, if you're trying to do everything by yourself, all of your laundry, taking care of your house, cleaning up after yourself, getting the groceries, whatever, it's very difficult. Within capitalism, oftentimes women are consigned to the role of support for the workers. That labor is invisible. We are alienated from that to the point where, oftentimes children growing up don't even recognize how much work their mother is doing to keep everybody okay, to keep everything fine, to make sure there's food on there. One thinks only, oh, daddy's going to work. Now, as I said, it's, my sister is the primary breadwinner in her household, and her husband is the one who does all of that, quote unquote, traditional women's labor. But it's very similar. It would look on the surface, oh, she's bringing in the money, well, he's just kind of staying home, watching how much work he has to do to take care of the house and their 2 children and her and make everything all happen. He's doing labor. That's, as I said, oftentimes invisible. But capitalism makes that invisible. Now, the fun thing about alienation of labor, and one of the reasons why it's so important to a pagan understanding of Marxism or a pagan understanding of capitalism, is that alienation of labor extends not just to the work we do, but to our bodies as well. Now, all labor is done through the body, even if it's just your mind, but, these hands do work, my feet do work. When you think of manual labor, people lifting things all of the time, their body is the agent of labor, basically. Or, the skill, like the way that the mind works with the hands if you are a cook, or a sculptor, or a potter, or working in a factory, just, pulling the same thing over and over again. All of that is done through the body. So our alienation from labor, from the work that we do and the work that other people do, is also related to our alienation from our body itself. We are bodies. Interestingly, before capitalism, most societies didn't even think of a division between body and self. You didn't have a body, you were a body. After capitalism, this idea that your body is just some part of you or something that you have that you then employ to do other things, that's a new idea. So, and from that alienation of our body, where we are, constantly tired, drinking coffee all of the time to make it so that we can get to work, not getting enough sleep. All right, so I need to do this, and I need to force my body to do this. I need to, all of these things that we do in order to do this work, this labor that is done for someone else. Someone else profits from all of the time. This extends as well to our alienation from the natural world. Again, as I said, behind me, right there, we have the means of production, but also we have land. Land right there. That's how labor starts. That's how all value within capitalism starts from, if we look at it economically, scientifically, modern, raw materials. That tree is a living thing. That tree is a body. Within capitalism, that tree isn't a body. That tree is a source of wood. There's also a maple there, so it's a source of maple syrup as well. and then that wood can then be transformed through labor into things like toilet paper or bread or bread. Bread does not come from trees. Sorry. Paper. I was saying paper. Oh, houses. Right. You can cut down that to make houses, to furniture, etc. That's what a tree is within capitalism. That's what a tree is oftentimes in modern society. We don't think of it as a thing of its own, just like we don't think of that lens behind us as a thing on its own. We think of it as instead something that can be taken into the cycle of production through our alienated labor to make money for someone else. So, yeah, anyway, so this video is getting a little long. I'm going to stop it here. I could talk for hours about alienation of labor. It's my favorite subject. But I hope this helps you kind of understand the principle behind it and why it's important to even, think about alienation of labor. I really feel like alienation of labor is the key to much of the environmental damage that capitalism causes. And also very key to our inability to feel ourselves any longer. Our inability to really understand what it is to be a body. That comes from capitalism, and that comes from that alienation of labor.